My name is Stefan Jensen. I'm working for the European Environment Agency. We are a partner of what we call the European Commission EEA Inspire team, and we are developing Inspire jointly with different capacities. And we have set up through the program committee this conference in a way that we would like to address these various elements of Inspire, infrastructure elements, elements on content, which we discussed mainly on the first day, on Tuesday. Yesterday it was about infrastructure, about new, innovative aspects of that. Today we speak about a very important aspect as well, which has here the rather humble title networking, but you can also translate it into governance, into cooperation. It describes the whole setup which is needed to move such cross-border, international, multi-people, multicultural initiatives ahead. So that is what we want to discuss today. And we will have a setup like in the past days. We will have 3 keynote speeches. And they will be addressing national aspects, European aspects, and international aspects. We will have 3 short interventions following the same pattern. And then I learned from Hugo, and from Max, yesterday. I also learned from Hugo, but from Max yesterday that it worked quite well with a panel, all people up on stage. So that's what we do with the 9 people later on. And with that, I would like to ask the first speaker on stage. Now I have to add, you have maybe seen the name Hans Breunings there. This is our EA's new director, but unfortunately, since he's only in office, we have been trying everything to get him here, and he was generally very keen, but it didn't work out at the very last moment. So we are sorry for that, but Chris will be an excellent stand-in, and he will speak about what we are pursuing. Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm trying to figure out how this thing here works. Yes, great, thanks. So first of all, I apologize from our new director, Hans Breunings, who started this month, so he's brand new in the topic. And yesterday we had our board meeting to discuss our 5-year plan that he, of course, needs to push forward. And of course, it was not possible to get him here on stage immediately after that important discussion. But I will try to sketch on his behalf as well, how we see now the evolution of the networking that is crucial for Inspire in the context of environmental policy development in Europe. And I will focus on 3 elements, which is extremely important for the future of Inspire. First of all, I will say something about improving the evidence base for environmental policy in Europe. And secondly, focus on a bit of on some challenges that we see for the coming years for Inspire. And then finally, how can we secure that Europe is doing the right thing within a global context, as I will illustrate as well with a few examples, and then come up with some conclusions. I will not dwell on Europe's environment policy agenda. I'm sure that I think Hugo is here as well. So the first day of the conference, you heard about probably the 7th Environmental Action Plan, so the plan towards 2020, where I think it is important to focus on priority objective 5. There are 9 priority objectives, and the 5th one is to improve the evidence base for environmental policy. There are 3 initiatives mentioned, Inspire, not at least for the infrastructure component, as well as the Shared Environmental Information System and Copernicus. And it is important to understand these 3 initiatives in the context on how do you build what is called this evidence base for environmental policy. And that goes from monitoring the environment, building data sets, extracting from it information, providing easy to understand communication tools to the decision makers, indicators, doing the assessment whether we are on the right track or not, and then share, of course, the knowledge. And that, I think, is crucial for Inspire in all these domains, from monitoring to reporting. But it's not only about average numbers. This is normally what we have seen over the past, I would say, 30, 40 years when environment came on the policy agenda, is where you have this kind of indicators, graphs, where in this case a very positive message that what Europe is doing on policy making, it works. We are now at the lowest level of, or at least the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, where the target that was put for 2020, we are clearly on track, so we are doing a good job. But if you see then what happens these days, it's not, we are missing something. The example that I put forward is here on flooding. Probably you all remember what happened the last weeks across Europe. And then the question is, do we know exactly what we need to know? And there we are struggling still with a dilemma. We have been focusing a lot, I would say, the last years on focusing on we need more detailed information. At least that was the request we got from European level. We need to know what is happening on local management plans, how near real time data can be made available about what is flooded, what are the assets that are affected. And on the other hand, the amount of information is exponentially increasing. How can we provide and to decision makers at national level, at the European level, at the international level, the relevant, aggregated, integrated information? And that, I think, is one of the main challenges for Inspire. And I will very briefly show you what we see as 3 strategic areas that how we can tackle that. That's first of all, the first one that you see on the left side, is that we need to continue to make sure that the implementation of all the instruments that have been put in place are doing the right job. So that's what is done for the Water Framework Directive, air quality, on biodiversity, nature protection. But next to that, now for the coming years, what will be important is that we assess what is called systemic challenges. You can't look at the environment in isolation. You have to look at it in coherence with what is happening from a social side, from an economic side, from a technological side. And that, I think, as well, is where we should not neglect when we are further evolving in Inspire, how we should tackle that in the context of building more on networks. And that is especially the focus of what we see as a 3rd strategic area, which we call the knowledge co-creation, the sharing and use of information. And co-creation is that nowadays you only can do it if you connect the local, the regional, the national, the international level together. So what we are aiming for in this 3rd strategic area is to maintain and build networks of people, of information system, to support the 2 other strategic areas on the acquis, the environmental acquis, as well as on the systemic challenges. And that is important because we are now in what is called a transitional decade. And that's what you see as well in the way how Europe is now tackling environmental policy. They do it in 3 steps. The first step is what I would call what we focus now for, together with EEA and the countries, on the 2014-2018, where we have clear targets. By 2015, in the Water Framework Directive, we are supposed to have good ecological status of water in Europe. That's something that we will assess now in 2015. But as well, we have to take it in the long term. So policy development is now always done in these 3 steps. You put targets, you put a vision 2020. You probably have heard about the 2020, 20% of renewable energy by 2020, and so on and so on. In the context of a 2050 perspective. A 2050 perspective where you have, for instance, some of you might know about the water blueprint, where maybe some was already approached as well during this meeting. We have about a further reduction of greenhouse gases, what we want to do on climate change. So that is how we try to structure the way to support the policy development in Europe. And more this is done together with a good understanding of what are the global megatrends. In 2010, we started to analyze which are the global megatrends that are influencing Europe at the national, at the local level. And I will just highlight a few of them. Probably the most known is what we call the environmental megatrends. Our children, they will have to face serious problems related to climate change mitigation. And it was like here showing the impact that we are expecting for the next 2 generations on what will be different here in Italy. The amount of change in runoff or climate, the temperature in where people are living, what is happening in the coastal areas. That is something that we need to make sure that by connecting the relevant networks from meteorological community, from the mapping communities, from the geological service, that we have the right information at hand. But more important is that we should not focus exclusively on the environmental dimension. If you look, for instance, in the social dimension and look to the right part of this diagram, in 2000, if you look to consumption, because that's important for the urban environment, which is now becoming a major topic for the next 5 years. On the urban environment, if you look to how the consumption pattern around the globe was more than 50% was defined how the middle class in Europe, together with the US, was dealing with waste, with goods and services, consumption. If you look in 2050, this will only be 10%. There will be the consumption patterns when we have to deal with waste, with material flows. This will be mainly driven by other global partners that we can't exclude from our information basis. And if you put that then in the technological megatrends, which is as important as well, is Inspire ready to tackle what is happening on the racing to the unknown? So this is a diagram where it's shown how new technological innovations, like, the television or electricity, mobile phones, what the time it takes that you have an uptake of this technology. Inspire is when we started with Inspire, and then the directive in 2007 with a perspective 2019, 2020, is it still the right instrument to deal with this technological evolution? We need to be very careful that we don't miss the boat there and that we don't get trapped in what we could call a very rigid lock-in situation for such a directive. So to conclude, I see that if I went through my pictures over the last, I would say a couple of months, over the last few months, Inspire is becoming more and more an instrument in global network discussions. The example of GEOS, where I see that some of you have been present in the discussion how Europe should profile its spatial data information sharing when it comes to monitoring. The global geographic information management, where Europe is now trying to set up a coordinated structure to see how can we make sure that when it comes to spatial data information and the infrastructure, we are indeed a recognized and also relevant partner in the global discussions. The same what happened beginning of this year when we had the first meeting of the Governing Council of UNEP, now with global participation, where for global environmental reporting will change dramatically. It will not be anymore that every 4 or 5 years UNEP will come up with a full-fledged report of what is happening with state and outlook of the global environment. It will now be driven by online systems, driven by web services. So that I think it will be crucial for Inspire to find as well its place in all these networks, the global networks as I just listed. And I want to emphasize one more, which is called the INERT network, where I would say the foundation was done in Europe a number of years ago, but now this is shifted to the global level, where now UNEP it is fully convinced that the necessity that UNEP should take the lead now on how to make sure that all the networks we have, from administrations, from private, from civil society, can provide a relevant structure for dealing with what we call networking to facilitate sharing and access to information for sustainable development. And that relates to networking at the local, the national, the regional, global level, the infrastructure networks, the science and technology networks, civil society, to make sure that we can hand all the content from monitoring to integrated environmental assessment, underpinned by the relevant spatial data infrastructure standards and tools. So my conclusion is for what I call the 4 I's that we also put forward in the context of the 7th EAP. First of all, Inspire, make sure that you can support the implementation, that we have better implementation and strengthening of the current environmental priorities. Make sure that Inspire can contribute to the integration, so that we have a coherent integration amongst the different sectors that we will have to tackle. The interlinkages, because when it comes to managing our natural capital and make sure that we have as well a resource-efficient future, we have to make sure as well that information infrastructure is adequate to that. And last but not least, that not exclude the international dimension that is not only at national level, it's not only at the local level, but as well at the European and international level that Inspire should find its place for the coming years. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for the excellent scene setting and Should there be a short question to Chris? There's an opportunity for 1 or 2 questions at this stage. It could be that there's one there, the lady there in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you. Uta Montalvo from UNESCO IHE. I appreciate very much the emphasis you put on the importance of knowledge co-creation to really address the systemic challenges that we face. You had a slide that started at the top with monitoring. And I was just wondering, what role do you see for citizens and communities to play in that monitoring part? Because I think we live in a digital age. We all have smartphones in our pockets and various other devices. So we do have the tools at hand now to really bring in the observations and the collective intelligence at that level as well. Could you comment?
Yes. I fully support your view that indeed citizens becoming an important sensor in how we have to monitor I would say not only the environment, I would say the green society at large. We have been doing some experiments on that already in the past years here in Europe. We mainly distinguish it in 2 kinds of how we can make use of the citizen. On the one hand, the crowdsourced information, where you try to make use of the 500 million people that we have in Europe, or the 6-7 billion people on this planet. And on the other hand, the citizen science, where you try as well to involve the citizens, but you try to do it on a quality assured basis to get the relevant information for decision makers. So that is the 2 approaches that we are developing currently here in Europe.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chris, again for the presentation. Let's have a go now on the national perspective. Martin Lenk, please. The stage is yours. Thanks.
So, thank you very much, first of all, to the organizers from this conference to be invited here. I believe the Commission knows that networking in Germany is quite a challenge due to the fact that we have a federated system. And I think that is the perspective I chose, basically, to have a comment here on the theme of networking. So let's come to my very short presentation. I was just informed I need to cut it down. You see the bar up there? I was expecting 15 minutes, so that's only 10 minutes. I apologize if I'm sometimes a bit short with explanations, but so you can ask questions afterwards. So let's have an overview. First of all, I'd like to introduce our little jungle, the public sector in Germany. Second, I'd like to quickly introduce our system, the answer for the jungle. I will have an organizational and a technical view. And in the last 2 points, I'd have some thoughts, a kind of summarize where are we right now, and looking into the future, what are the challenges and chances. It will be a complete different talk to what we heard now. I'm very glad to see this big vision coming now, and now we have a little look into the daily work. So let's go into the jungle tour in Germany. I think you know these pictures. We have a federal systems. I know in Europe there are some other states which are structured the same way. Some others are more centralized. In Germany, we have a federal government. It looks, I think, from outside quite strong. When we talk about foreign affairs or economic things, we have a very strong government. When it comes to internal affairs, we need to see that most things are done on a state level, on a local level, and like health or school system, all this data and things that are basically collected on this level. And this is a real challenge for us when we come to inspire, basically, to deal with these different states. Another challenge, and that's maybe with this picture clear that we can talk from a jungle, is that we also have a very strong local level. A lot of tasks are carried out on the local level. That means, for instance, in looking in Inspire NX3, a lot of data sets are on this level. Well, this is the challenge, what we saw when we built up our network 10 years ago, when we were thinking how can we find the best way through this kind of jungle. And that leads to the second point, what was our answer to have basically a system which adapts to this. Maybe you've seen this slide before. in other presentations on some Inspire conferences. We already introduced that. That is our structure, our Inspire structure. We have in the middle a steering committee where we have the representatives from the state governments and from the federal government. We also included some representatives from the local level. And very important, I think, is that this steering committee politically is set up in the field of e-government. E-government is a cross-thematic theme. Inspire is a cross-thematic theme. Very important with our network that we are not working just with an eye from a ministry, not just with an eye from environment or land surveying. No, that must be a cross-thematic organization. So very quickly, the different levels which are working on the Inspire network. I already introduced the steering committee, basically responsible for the main strategies. It's also formally the national point of contact. We have an operational unit, that's where I work, in the coordination office, a staff of about 10 people. We are dealing with all the partners, delivering data sets, but also with the Commission. Very important, and I'd like to point that out, is that since this year, we have also a department doing IT coordination. We have central components for our Inspire network. Networking is not only organizational, it's also technical. In this IT department, we run our central components, which I will introduce in the next slides. And last but not least, really important, that is basically the base for Inspire. This is the level where all the data sets and the services are coming out. These are all the organization and the experts being basically responsible for implementing, providing, and using our infrastructure. So we could say, maybe summarize here already, we have a powerful structure, fully operational, high involvement of different organizations. We can deliver towards Inspire. I hope the Commission agrees to that. I put a little smiley on that. I'm quite satisfied with this. Organization, as I said, is not everything. You need a good concept. We wrote down a concept already in the year 2007. That was one of our main goals, which we basically reached in the year 2007. It is a kind of cookbook where we wrote down our technology, all the standards, all the things we need basically when you want to take part in Inspire. And very important, we wrote that really easy. It's only 60, 70 pages, it's public available, and this is something what we deliver to our partner, that they can understand how can I basically be part of the network. So another first summary, we have a good SDI cookbook, which is public available, up to date, and very helpful for implementing SDI services, Inspire, and again, another smiley, we're quite pleased with that. A concept is one thing, the implementation is the real world. We're already working, I think, quite hard on the implementation, and we have already, I think, a lot to show. You see here an architectural, picture from our infrastructure, quite similar to probably what you do in your country. On the right side, you see all the decentral spatial data sets and services. On the other hand, you see the central SDI components, which I mentioned before. For instance, we have a central catalog for optimizing the search. We have a registry, well, it's just under development, but it will be online this year, where we deliver general information for the data holders, for instance, code lists, data models, and so on. We have a software for compliance testing. This is something what we already introduced here on Monday on a workshop, which we can also offer to the network here, a software basically to test standard conformity. And as many other countries as well, we've got a geo portal. This is basically our showcase. This is what you can basically use in the internet to see what's inside in our infrastructure. So another comment here, already positive. I think we have a well-implemented architecture which delivers data and services. It supports data and service providers, and it includes, very important in my view, IT governance aspects. The question now is this bridge good and strong enough actually to find the right way through the jungle? So far, I basically had a quite positive evaluation, but I think some critical things, if we want to develop into the future, are necessary as well. So that comes to the third point, where are we right now? Looking at the present time. I wrote down this question for myself, and I found out actually I cannot answer it. I need to break down it easier questions, and these three questions I'd like to discuss here in front of you very quickly. The first question is, did we include everybody? Are we really efficient with our network, and is our technical concept useful for everybody? I think actually the last point is very important. So far we are serving ourselves. For instance, we are serving the Commission with monitoring and reporting, but there are other communities. They have expectations, and I think we need to deliver to them as well. Well, first questions, is everybody included? Well, I think I already pointed out, I think we have a good organization. I'm quite impressed myself with that in Germany, but also there are some critical points. I must say, I think we have a lack of involvement of the local level. I think when I hear to other presentations, this is the same situations in other countries as well. I think that is a very critical point. I already said in Annex 3 we have a lot of themes which are basically addressed to the local level, and we really need to think about how can we approach to this kind of community. We have another lack of involvement, and I think this lack was mentioned here a lot during these conferences and in conferences before. Inspire was set up basically also to improve the EU reporting for loads of other directives, and we have problems in Germany to identify these communities. And I think this needs a better cooperation in the future between the Commission and us to basically identify those organizations. Next questions, are we envisioned? Can we use the same water basically for different things? I think we are quite well if we use our infrastructure for Inspire itself. We have problems when we basically want to develop. This is only one critical point which I want to mention here. I think change management is a big issue in the IT world. We're doing IT work. I think in the future we need to basically improve our change management processes. I have high expectations to the maintenance and implementations group. We need to work really well together. We just saw a picture from Magdeburg. We had all these floods in Germany. We talk, that is only one example, since years about sensor web enablement, and is still not ready, and I'm not sure if it takes maybe another few years, but you see we have to solve the problems now. So change management, being quicker, being efficient, being more flexible, I think, is really important. Next question, last question, is our technical concept and implementation really useful? Well, I must say we have a lot in our infrastructure. That is just one number in our geodata catalog. On that central catalog, which is basically harvesting other catalogs in Germany, we find about 130,000 metadata. That is a lot of resources. Quality is another issue, I must say, but we work on that. There is a lot there. We have thousands of services, viewing services, which we can already use in application, and we have a growing number of download services. This leads to this, I must say, positive picture. Looking into the Inspire portal, you can say, yes, we can deliver towards Inspire, and a lot of things which we have in our infrastructure, they're going right through our technical infrastructure to the Commission. There are still a few issues, I must say, but I would say these are minor issues. We have real problems when we work with other networks, when we work with other communities. What you see here on the right side is a screenshot from our governmental portal, what we developed in Germany in the last year. We had a really strong and intensive cooperation, and the idea was basically to serve this infrastructure with the spatial data infrastructure, basically to use our geodata catalog and connect it to the CCAN-based solution of the e-government, of the open data community. It did not work. You see here, failure. So far, we didn't, or we couldn't really connect these two different worlds. I don't want, and I cannot explain it. At 3 o'clock, or no, 2 o'clock, there's a session in, I think, room 5, and I think this is a real theme we have to face in the future, looking into other viewpoints in other worlds, other IT worlds, and making our infrastructure, not for our own purposes, also for other purposes, useful. So, time is more or less over. I speed up with a few thoughts about challenges. I think all things which I mentioned during my little note here, I think we need to move more towards the local level. Our feeling is that at the moment they're feeling quite hassled with requirements from Inspire, with very complicated documents. I think what we need to do, we need use cases on the local level, and then there is more understanding also for participating in our network. We need to integrating the EU reporting communities. I think there is a good point here in October in Copenhagen. I saw there is this meeting with the IO network, and I hope that in the future that will be a common project between member states and the Commission to improve this situation. We need to take part with an active role, I think, in other strategies and programs. I'm very pleased to see that Inspire is addressed already in the ISA programs, and I can only say to other member states, very important to do the same things in our member states as well. We are cooperating with these infrastructures, and I think it's really necessary. And last not least, I think the best thing we can do to improve our network is to have a better quality, not just look on quantity. 130,000 metadata in Germany sounds wonderful, but if you cannot really use them, if there is a lack of important information, for instance licenses, then is not very helpful. So I think that is a really big issue. Work on the quality and make our things, our results, our products more useful. Chances, I was thinking, what are the chances? It's actually all written in the directive. Just start reading it. I think you've done it. I heard from Hugo that there is another action program, environmental action program. I think we have to take these things very serious. Furthermore, I think we need to reinforce our existing network with good practices. Use cases, I think, is the key word for the future. We need to enlarge with new stakeholders like e-government and open government communities. And also we need to improve our network by integrating into other systems. It's like a proof of concept to take part in this open government world. My last word is a big thank to this network here. I think in Germany what we've done was a lot of experience done by other people in other countries. And I must say, especially by the Commission, we adapted a lot of things with copy and paste for our network. Thank you very much.